Hello everyone, welcome to today's session where we are going to resume our discussion over the topic History of English Novel. As you know that this is the session third or part third of this topic History of English Novel, where we are going to discuss about the pioneers of the novel, other important authors of the 18th century in terms of novel writing, and also will take an overview of the key features of 18th century novels. And in the previous two sessions, we have already discussed about the antecedents of the novel, and in the second session, we discussed about the definition and origin of novel, rise of novel in the 18th century, along with the factors that influenced the rise of the novel. So let's begin today's session. To begin with Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe was born in 1660 in London, and before becoming a writer at the age of 58, he was a merchant, a manufacturer, a public official, and an editor. And he began his writing career by publishing his first book, Robinson Crusoe, in 1719, and which was followed by the second publication, Moll Flanders, in 1722. He is considered as the first true master of English novel, and he is also credited that he introduced the technique of realism in novel writing. As if we take the example of his Robinson Crusoe, there is a character who is fictitious, though the character is fictitious in this book, but by using the first person narrative technique. In the first person narration, he is describing the events, which gives which gives an impression, we can say, of which creates fiction as a fact, or which presents fiction as a fact to the reader. This first person narrative technique, he narrated in first person, so that is why the technique of realism he experimented with. And it is also said that though the novel had no significant plot because it is an account of chronological sequence of events, but it had that touch of realism that made Defoe popular at that time. And he is also said to be the founder of the modern novel. However, there are critics who categorized him in the category of or who categorized his works in the category of romances because of the element of adventure and crime dominated in his novels. But then too, the later novelists who wrote autobiographical novels, they were influenced by Defoe's style. And the next one whom we are going to discuss is Samuel Richardson, who was born in 1689 at Derbyshire in London. And he worked as a printer in the journals of the House of Commons and law printer to the king. And it is said that Richardson had in his youthful stage, he had an experience of writing. He had many experiences of writing love letters for three young women, and through these experiences, he understood the ways of femininity. And this knowledge which he gained at this youthful stage, he utilized this knowledge while writing his epistolary novel Pamela or Virtue Rewarded, which was published in 1740. To give you an idea of this word epistolary, I can say that if you have heard about the word epistle means a letter or a literary composition in the form of letter. So we can say that epistolary novel is the novel which is written in the form of a series of letters. And that is why in this novel Pamela, the narrator is Pamela, and this novel is also an exchange between a girl, or the narrator Pamela, and her friends, where through a series of letters this girl Pamela informed her parents about her experiences. Actually, this girl Pamela is a servant girl in this story, and she who is employed to a rich landowner, and he informed her parents that how he maintained her virtue amidst the situations when her employers and how we can say, in short, if I tell you, Pamela informed her parents that how Pamela is succeeded in maintaining her virtue amidst the inappropriate advances of her uh, employer, who is a rich landowner, and until he proposes her marriage. So this was Pamela, and which is a series of letters which is presented through a series of letters. So according to Richardson, it was belief of Richardson, or Richardson believed that a novelist has a dual purpose while writing novels. First is to inform the readers, and the second is to impart morality, and that is very well reflected in his novels as well. And Richardson is also credited for writing a novel of character by exploring the psychological development of his characters like Pamela, which is in pure contrast with Defoe, who explored the character of his or who explored or who developed his character by the physical development, by the physical development of his character, like Robinson Crusoe. In Robinson Crusoe, we find a physical development of a character by exploring his physical developments, whereas in Richardson there is a more psychological development, and he developed a novel of or he also introduced a novel of character. And then the later later novels, Clarissa, or the History of Young Lady, and the History of Sir Charles Grandison were his later novels, which were also in epistolary mode, and he is also said to give this element or the feature of sentimentality to this genre of writing novel. Next is Henry Fielding. He was born in 1707 in Chatham Park near Glastonbury, and he studied law. He is said to be the father of English novel, and he was also influenced by the picaresque style of writing. And Henry Fielding is known for his writings such as Shamala, Joseph Andrews, and Tom Jones. And Fielding is the one who is famous for depicting a true and realistic picture of human nature. For instance, his work Shamala, which is actually a parody to Richardson's Pamela. Shamala is a parody, or we can say parody, where Fielding is parodizing, he is mocking, he is ridiculing Richardson's Pamela, his novel Pamela, because according to Fielding, Pamela, the novel, is depicting a hypocritical morality. So that is why Fielding is known for his realistic picture of human nature, and he continued to mock, continued to ridicule his Richardson's Pamela by writing Joseph Andrews, where he presented an opposite picture, where a man whose name is Joseph Andrews, who is pursued by a rich lady. In this way, he continued his parody by writing again Joseph Andrews, and Fielding also said to have popularized and laid the foundation of comic novels. And the last pioneer which we are going to discuss, whom we are going to discuss, is Laurence Sterne. Laurence Sterne was born at a place called Clonmel in Ireland in 1713. He graduated from Cambridge and later became a priest. Unlike his contemporaries, Sterne was far different and unique in his approach in novel writing, as he experimented in novel writing by creating different styles of novel. And he was very much different from his contemporaries, because at that time, or we can say, rather than following a conventional method or a traditional method where a plot has a proper beginning, middle and end, Sterne novel had nothing such sort of. As for example, and before that, before giving an example, I would like to read this statement about Sterne, as it was said about him that he was different and remote from the major novelist of his time. And now we should come to the example, his novel Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, which was published in 9 separate volumes between 1759 to 1767. in this novel is a perfect example of Stern's techniques, where he is employed autobiographical but non-linear narrative technique. What do I mean here by non-linear narrative technique? That in this Stern uh, employs frequent flashbacks. As we can see in today's modern novel, he experimented or he employed such technique far before in the time, where non-linear narrative, in the sense that he was frequently jumping and skipping ahead of time and then shifting back in the time. In this way, he his novel was not having a proper beginning. Rather, it started from this particular novel, if we talk about this, started from the middle, and it was also intercepted with the devices like digressions, humorous reflections, and deliberate blank pages. Yes, deliberate blank pages means that if you're guessing, it is right, that in his novels there are blank pages are left blank deliberately, and the purpose was that they are supposed to be filled or fill in by the readers, and readers are supposed to fill their response in those blank pages. So such was the effective technique, such types of effective techniques and experiments done presented his novels. And though critics often say that his novel had not a particular plot, but later in time, as modern writings were very much affected by his writing style, as if we talk about the particular writers, then Joyce and Woolf were very much influenced by his style of writing when they used stream of consciousness narrative technique. So these were the pioneers of writing novels in the 18th century, and some other prominent authors were Tobias Smollett and Jonathan Swift. To talk about Tobias Smollett, he is famous for writing satire and describing familiar scenes, follies, foibles, knavery of the ordinary life. And he was also very much influenced, and he was also writing in a picaresque style, as in his two novels, or these novels which are displayed on the screen are writing in such style: Adventures of Roderick Random and Gilbas. The next one, Jonathan Swift, he is also famous for writing satire and allegory, as is these two novels. A Tale of Tub and Gulliver's Travels are famous allegorical novels, and Swift is said to have introduced through his novels what he introduced. He introduced that how fantasy is how we can use fantasy as a story. Story or fantasy can be used as a satire to reveal weakness in the society, and he did so very well by these two novels, A Tale of a Tub and Gulliver's Travels. And I encourage you to read some more prominent authors which I am not discussing here, and find out them and read about them. You will find it very interesting. And so all in all, we can now take an overview of the key features of 18th century novels. After this discussion, I think we have now understood to a certain extent that which are the key features of 18th century novels. The first one is very obvious, that it is realism. That yes, writers brought in realism through their novel writing, and as novels were the perfect instrument to explore and present the reality of the society, and this novelist did very well by taking the examples from the real lives or real characters from life. And techniques were also useful in presenting this reality of society, as the one of the popular technique was first person narrative. And as we have already discussed, that first person narrative played an important role in presenting fiction, which is something fiction, as fact to the readers. And also the characters were also ordinary man and women, were rather in very much comparison to romances where the characters are dragons, giants, or some supernatural being. In comparison to those romances, novels characters are much more ordinary and men and women with whom readers can easily relate with. And also the protagonist around whom the story is revolving is also hailing from middle class. So the settings and the atmosphere or the surroundings are very much relatable to the readers. And also if we see that what were novelists were promoting prominently, then we can see at certain point of time the novelists were trying to promote virtuous character. Through their novels they were promoting virtuous character, as we have seen in Pamela, as Richardson did. And novelists were also using novels for pointing out the vices in the society through the satire and allegory, as Jonathan Swift and Smollett did. So in this way we can see that all the novelists were trying or experimenting in their own style, and they have really contributing unique aspects to this genre of writing, new genre of writing in the 18th century. For instance, Fielding contributed, or Fielding popularized epic novels. Richardson contributed, or he did well with his epistolary and sentimental take. And Defoe, he also contributed well with realistic novel indeed, and Swift with his satirical and philosophical novel, and Stern with his experimental novel. So in this way we can observe that these novelists, rather than following some traditional or conventional methods, as classical writers were bound to write in those boundaries of traditional methods, these writers or these novelists were very much experimenting and providing fresh avenues and possibilities for writing novels. So in this way these were the experiments, and you should remember that this was a time of revolution and experimentation in novel writing, and this experimentation in novel writing further gave birth to new creativities, I can say, in terms of subgenres and different genres of novel. And these subgenres which emerged in post 18th century we will discuss in the next session. So that's all for today. I look forward to see you in the next lecture. Thank you for your attention.